We will begin. Good evening and welcome to the City Council meeting for June the 15th, 2021. We will begin by asking our City Secretary to call the roll.
Councilman De La Garza.
I'm present.
Councilman Bachnight.
Here.
Councilwoman Scott.
Here.
Councilman Young.
Here.
Councilman Lofgren.
Here.
And Mayor Pro Tem Solis.
Here. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this time, we will take a moment of silence to allow each member of the City Council and those in attendance to prepare their hearts and minds to appropriately do the business of our city. And I just want to let y'all know that I became a grandma this morning, so 9 pounds, something else, a baby, so.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. You may be seated. Sitting in the chamber, city council chamber remains limited to allow for social.
Madam Mayor Pro Tem, if I may, before you get started, I think you may have missed actually calling the meeting to order. If you wouldn't mind just calling the meeting to order and banging the gavel so that our city secretary can catch a time.
We did.
I did.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, we did.
Yeah, it was the very first thing I did. I'm sorry. Sitting in the city council chambers remains limited to allow for social distancing, and there are still many residents in our high-risk population. For this reason, we will also continue allowing citizen participation through video conferencing. To learn about all the ways you can watch the meeting and participate remotely, we encourage you to visit www.victoriatech.gov/talktocouncil. There are many options for how you can participate in our meeting tonight, ranging from watching on TV or speaking in citizens' communication through Zoom. For those citizens that wish to speak in person to the council during the communication or during a public hearing, we ask that you complete a comment card that looks like this and give it to a staff member. Comment cards are located outside of the door of the chamber council, the council chamber. Mr. Entium, do you have any announcements this evening?
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem, and good afternoon, Madam Pro Tem and Council. We do have a couple of announcements. So we would like to, first of all, remind City Council that the budget work sessions for fiscal year 2022 will be held on Monday, June 21st, Tuesday, June 22nd, and Wednesday, June 23rd, if necessary. And the meetings or the work sessions will be held in City Council chambers at 5 p.m. So at the work sessions, the departments will present their FY22 budget proposals utilizing the OpenGov, which is our new online interactive budget system. On your desk, Council, you will find a binder with the draft FY22 budget documents, along with a thumb drive with the draft budget documents in a PDF format, and a high-level budget calendar. You will also find on your desk the Capital Improvement Program report. Thank you to Gilbert and Todd for preparing the report. Both documents will be available on the city's website for council in public access on June 21st. So the public can access it on June 21st. Finally, we would like to let you know, council, that based on your guidance, city staff have developed a page on the city's website dedicated to the American Rescue Plan Act. On that page, council, staff, and citizens are encouraged to submit their proposals for how best to utilize the funds provided to the city through the American Rescue Plan Act. So that form and all relevant information can be found online at www.victoriatx.gov/American Rescue Plan. Before I call Ken Gill to do the next announcement, Madam Pro Tem, Gilbert, did you have anything else in the budget?
Thank you, Mike. Council, I just want to let you know, this is the first year we're using the OpenGov. And the document you have in front of you is not the one you always used to get, that nice and everything else pretty. Which this one is truly a working document. As you remember, we just started incorporating the software. It was implemented around February, March, and we try to get everything that's done for the budget work session. So I apologize if everything is not in there. One thing that we're still working on is not making it nice and readable and everything else. For example, tax information detailed out on the voters' approval rate and everything else proposed. It's not there, but when it comes Monday, we have a PowerPoint. It's going to show you everything. If God willing, I'd like to have that PowerPoint out to you sometime towards the end of the week, so you have some time to review and everything else, because that information is crucial during the whole budget development too as well. But as we progress through this whole process, hopefully at August, everything should be back to a norm like you used to and everything else. One last item is that you're going to see a lot of pics when you go to the OpenGov cloud side. In there, we put some variance pictures of the numbers and everything else. We're still working on that table itself. So it's time to develop in all those software and connections. So give us some more time, but we just still using the old Gilbert format in a way and piecemealing everything with the new Gilbert format. So bear with us, but we have a product to start with as a workshop for next Monday. Thank you, Mike and Council.
Thank you, Gilbert. So again, the budget work sessions, June 21st, 22nd, 23rd, 5 p.m., City Council chambers. So
Mr. Etienne, is
Yes.
there a deadline on the American Rescue Plan page when you want us to put comments in there by?
No, we do not have a deadline.
Okay. Will there be one at some point?
At some point, upon further discussion with council, we probably will. But at the moment, no, we do not have a deadline.
Okay, thank you.
Derek, do you want to add to that?
Just adding some clarification to that, we're still waiting actually on some guidance and guidelines on the ability to use some of those funds. And so at the moment, we have the broad scope, broad picture of what we can use them for, but more specific guidance in terms of the implementation of that is forthcoming. So we couldn't put a deadline now, but after that, we will.
Thank you.
But no deadlines. So again, for citizens who want to go and share their comments in terms of how the funds could be spent, they could go on the website or the webpage, which is victoriatx.gov/American Rescue Plan. So at this time, I would like to ask Ken Gill to come forward and provide a brief update on the city's efforts to help the Brentwood neighborhood address the current water situation.
Yes. Hello, good evening. A week ago, last Friday, which was June 4th, Brentwood's well failed. And I mean, they're working on it now, but it failed to the point where they couldn't provide any water to their residents out there. They have 164 connections. They called us that evening asking, what can we do as a city to help them? Right within a couple of 100 feet, we have a fire hydrant, dead end line. So we said, hey, you can, if you want, get a RPZ or reduced pressure zone meter, and we'll put a fire hydrant meter, provide you water. And they went, and then they contacted Stallion, which is a oil field service, but they have a potable water truck, a large one. So they'd fill up the water truck, take it down to their well site, where they have 2 tanks. They'd fill up the tanks and then pump water out to the system. Well, that went on for about a week, and they said, we got to come up with something a little bit more, stable. So we worked with them. They were Aqua Service, which is the water purveyor out there, really worked with TCEQ. How can we get a better, more stable service? So what we came up with them was still a 2-inch water meter. They put a hard line into their main lines, basically, which is, I think, a 6-inch line. So now they're feeding directly from us to them. They're still under a boil water notice because of the fact that they were groundwater. Now they're technically surface water. But we are giving them water. It's for the residents, and they are actively working on that well. But just an update that I know, They don't have the pressure they had before, but they do have water. So it's been a good cooperation effort between the city, Brentwood, the water purveyor, TCQ. Everybody is really looking out for the citizens, for the residents that are out there. But we're hoping that within the next couple of weeks, they get that well repaired. But, you know, there's other options available, and they're working hard. Just wanted to give you an update if y'all got any questions.
Well, thank you, Ken. Again, council, we just wanted to be good neighbors to our friends in Brentwood. So we were more than happy to lend a hand to help them with the water situation. So this is, that's all the reports that we have today.
Are there any public or employee recognitions today, Mr. Antiem?
No, Madam Pro Tem.
Okay, thank you. Are there any items not otherwise listed on the agenda for which members of the City Council would like to request specific factual information, a recitation of existing policy, or a placement on future agendas? Okay, seeing none, we'll go to citizens' communications. As a reminder, citizens' communication may be done either in person or through video conferencing. We would encourage anyone who has any recent exposure to COVID-19 or those that may be in high-risk population to make use of the video conference option. These instructions are again available at www.victoriatexas.gov/talk-to-council. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes in duration and will be received by audio only. There will not be an opportunity to provide any presentation or visual material either in person or via teleconference. Please remember to silence any cell phones, televisions, or other background noise so that we can clearly hear your comments. It is generally the practice of the City Council not to respond to comments made during this time, but city staff will be available to follow up as necessary. If you wish to speak about an item scheduled for a public hearing later in the evening, please refrain from commenting until we reach that point in the agenda. Are there any comment cards? I know I have one. Thank you. Mr. Michael, you're in every city council, so come on up and let us know.
Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for taking over the mayor pro tem job for Mr. McCoy. I just wanted to thank Christopher Watts for his job at code enforcement with the trailer park. About 20% of the people don't believe in mowing, and the grass, it got up to 6 foot, you know, and they will not mow unless, you know, the trailer park owner gets written up, and sometimes he don't even bring his own crew to mow, and code enforcement has to get a contractor or someone from the city of Victoria to mow. Or they'll just mow part of it and think that's good enough. When you mow your yard, you got to mow the whole thing, just not half of it. And I hate it when you go home and your house is gone. You know, people are lighting up fireworks and burning houses down. And I don't think the Victoria Police Department found out who burnt the house down with fireworks last year. It was between North Bend Jordan and Lone Tree Road. And they popped fireworks, you know, in my trailer and beside my trailer and all throughout the area about this time. And I was hoping maybe they could have some police patrol or something and maybe double the fine since it's in a hot spot, you know, where people are known to do fireworks. And once the grass gets up to 4 foot, they do lose their due process and constitutional rights. According to the law, they don't even have to give them a warning once it gets 4 foot high, because it's not just a mosquito hazard, it's a fire hazard. And they only have to give them 7 days. You know, if code enforcement is giving them longer, that's just them being nice. But if they want to get technical with the law, they only have to give you 7 days, you know. And if you refuse to mow and the trailer park owner gets in trouble, he's probably going to come down on you, you know. But that's it. But thanks and have a good day. Appreciate it.
Next, Smith Ann Richards.
Hey, this is on Zinc Resources LLC, a toxic waste company that recycles zinc and iron. In environmental terms, despite its commercial success, the Whaley's process generates a significant amount of waste. In Spain, 56% of EAF dust processed will leave the Wells kiln in countercurrent for proper environmental disposal. What does this mean for Victoria? This means Zinc Resources plans to dump up to 56% of all the EAF dust they process into our air because they have zero left over. What should Victoria want? Zinc Resources shouldn't come, or they should build a bag house right before the stack and have the steel mill pick up its leftover EAF dust. Why should the steel mill pick up the leftover dust? Cradle to grave. Anyone who generates hazardous substances is responsible for that waste from generation until the end of time. Victoria doesn't want its air to become a toxic waste dump and doesn't want our landfill to become a toxic waste dump. I have questions about the lead levels. Lead might be our biggest problem, especially if there is no bag house between the stack. This is because scientific studies of the content of, EAF dust samples lead content between 0.2 and 3%. Every EAF dust sample is different, even from the same mill, is different. An average Wales kiln processes 75,000 tons per year. That would be a possible 150 tons per year to 1,612.5 tons per year of lead put in our air if there is no baghouse before the stack. Some of that lead could end up in the Wells products, of course. I don't know how much. But Zinc Resources cannot guarantee us the 0.53 lead on the permit. Citizen monitors are required. The president of Zinc Resources, Russ Robinson, has another zinc recycling company called Global Steel Dust, which has a flow diagram on his website showing a bag house before a stack. Okay, next I'm regarding the tax abatement. Let me give you an example. Case County Council voted not to approve tax incentives for Wells Sustainable Products, a zinc recycling plant for Longsport, Indiana. Instead, they kept their bargaining chip to negotiate lower emissions and better air monitoring.
Can you cut it now? Because it's past your time.
Okay,
Thank you.
can I leave booklets for the members?
Yes, just give them to the gentleman over there, please.
Okay.
And thank you for coming. James, do we have anyone that wants to talk to us via conference? Are there any other citizens that wish to address us that did not fill out a card? Thank you. April, it's your turn.
Item C1 is an ordinance establishing the City of Victoria Municipal Court as the court of record and declaring an effective date.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. I'm here tonight to present information on becoming a court of record, as well as the ordinance, and answer any questions that you all may have. So some of the key differences of court of record versus a non-record court are a recorded transcript we would be required to have, an attorney judge, appeals on the record, as opposed to a trial de novo. So that would mean an appeal based on an error occurring at court. And then expanded jurisdiction to include civil jurisdiction. Right now, it's mostly criminal and with limited civil abilities. So some of these requirements we do already meet. One of those being the judge must be a licensed attorney with 2 or more years of experience. Our current presiding judge is an attorney and has 2 or more years of experience. We have to have a court reporter or the ability to record proceedings, which we have with the current setup available now. The development of a new court seal, which we have here, our Public Information Office has created this for the court. And then the other requirement would be the enactment ordinance that we are presenting tonight, which would establish us as a court of record. Some of the key advantages of becoming a court of record are expanded jurisdiction under the certain chapters listed here, which would include junked vehicle, civil jurisdiction over junked vehicles, nuisance abatements. It would also include building standards and different health and safety nuisance violations that would need to also be amended in the city code violations as well. The authority for a municipal court judge to issue administrative search warrants. Those administrative search warrants can be issued for various departments, including code enforcement, planning, fire marshal's office, in order for them to inspect the property prior to any cases being filed with the court. And then assessment of civil penalties. This could be fines of up to $1,000 per day. Currently, the jurisdiction that we have does not allow any orders of compliance to occur. They simply can be fined for the violation, but the court cannot order them compliance. And this would give us the ability, or the judge, not myself, but the judge, the ability to order compliance of certain types of properties or health and safety nuisance violations. Some of the administrative impacts that we anticipate by transitioning to a court of record would be training for various departments, including municipal court staff, the judge, our assistant city attorney, code enforcement, and any other departments that we see may need these additional powers that we would have, the ability to have. And then implementing, just updating our standard operating procedures to include those that are different from our current abilities, which again is mostly those civil processes, administrative hearings, and the various processes that would change with this transition. And then a retention policy for the recordings. We would be required to maintain the recordings for a 20-day time frame. And that would be, the recordings are only required if somebody is requesting their proceeding to be recorded. And then an anticipated increase in workload due to the expansion of the jurisdiction for not just our department, but for the various departments that would be impacted, to include code, fire marshal, city attorney's office. Some of the current budgetary considerations, the training for the court of record transition would be a one-time cost of up to $10,000. Recommend an increase to code enforcement's abatement budget. The $5,000 one-time cost represented here would be for the remaining of this fiscal year, and then the $20,000 would be additional for future years. And then transcription of proceedings for indigent defendants, an estimated reoccurring cost of about $500. Again, this would only be if somebody here requested the proceeding and did not have the ability to pay for that transcribing. If somebody else would want to request it, they would have to pay for that cost. Future budgetary considerations we anticipate would be civil software enhancement to our existing software. Our current software could be utilized for this next fiscal year, even going into 2022, as we adapt to the changes in the process. Establishing the court today as a court of record is just the first step, but there are codes that still need to be looked at and amended to allow civil enforcement within the municipal court. So this would just be the first step. So for the first year, we could anticipate using our existing software that we have, and the software enhancement here would be in future years. And so that would be a one-time cost of $21,700 with a reoccurring cost of $4,125 for the maintenance fee. And that complements our existing software that's used for criminal purposes. Continuing education for court personnel, we could see an increase in that of $2,100. An associate judge, the cost for this is to be determined as the salary study that had been occurring. And then municipal court personnel is another to be determined cost as we anticipate, get accustomed to the new changes in the processes and procedures. At a later time, we could possibly come back and need additional personnel either in our department or other departments. And so the next steps then tonight would be if council approves this ordinance, declaring an effective date. Next steps after that would then be training of court personnel in the impacted departments, and then review those existing ordinances for potential amendments and adjustments regarding the civil enforcement. And I'm here if you have any questions for me.
Mayor Pro Tem, if I may add one thing to her presentation, which I think she did a very good job on. There's one, call it unintended side effect of readopting this ordinance that was not discussed previously with you guys, and that is that the way the ordinance is written, it will reappoint our judge, because it simply declares that the judge of the municipal court shall be the judge of the municipal court of record, and that's going to reset Judge Heinold's term. Her term is currently set to expire on October of 2022. And so this will actually have the effect of renewing her term for an additional 2 years beginning now. So it'll be a slight extension to her term, and I wanted to make sure that y'all were aware of that.
So then her term would go through October of 2024?
It would go through 24 months from now, so that would be June of 2023. It's about a 6-month extension on her current term. We have reached out to her and confirmed with her that she agrees to that extension.
The recurring costs on the right-hand side of your tables, those are all annual?
Yes.
And are they in next year's budget already?
These would not be, these future budgetary considerations, we would be looking at fiscal year 2023 as opposed to 2022. The current budgetary considerations, we could absorb the one-time expenditures with our existing budget, as well as the indigent defendants of $500. Now, the increasement, the anticipated code enforcement abatement budget increase is if additional abatement is needed. So as of this time, these are recommended, but not necessarily required. As the first year, we may need some adapting to the processes and procedures. But we could absorb, the $10,000 for training in our existing budget and the $500 as of right now. And then the future costs we would be looking at for 2023 and beyond. I have anticipated some additional things into 2022 that are already included in the existing budget that we'll discuss next week. But these costs would not be coming, these particular ones here would not be until 2023. Any further questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
You have the costs. How would it affect revenues?
There would be an anticipated increase in collections, particularly if the civil assessment of penalties are adjusted in the ordinances. So while there might be additional costs, that could be offset with additional potential revenues coming in from the civil penalties. Those would have to be adjusted in the ordinances, though. That's my understanding. Thomas might be able to correct me if I'm wrong on that.
All right, just have to push my button first. Yes, I think that's exactly correct. There are potentially additional revenues associated with the additional jurisdiction. That, of course, is dependent upon us using that additional jurisdiction and filing the additional cases. So it's very difficult to predict what those numbers might be.
If we currently need a warrant, how do we go about doing it now?
If we currently require a warrant, we have to go to another court, whichever court has jurisdiction over
Does
the
that
matter.
cost us money? Is there a fee associated with that?
I don't know the answer to that question. I believe the answer is probably no, but that would be, in a criminal matter, you would be talking about a police officer pursuing a search warrant, for example, from a district court judge or a county court judge. That is not a process that our office is typically involved with. Ms. Solis, this item, remember, is up for public hearing tonight, and so we may want to go ahead and call the public hearing on this item.
Okay. At this time, we'll open the public hearing. If you wish to speak in this item, please raise your hand, feature on Zoom, and submit a comment card to staff, or submit a comment card to staff. Are there any comment cards on this item? Mr. Foote, are there any citizens who raised their hand to speak? Okay. If there's no further comments, I will close the public hearing, and I'll ask for a motion in a second.
I move to approve item C1.
I second.
Okay, we have a motion from Jeff and a second from Jan. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Item C2,
Item C2 is an ordinance amending and readopting the traffic regulation schedules as provided in various sections of City Code.
Good evening again. I'm looking at, okay, got it. This is really the first thing that started was the Crestwood, and I want to start with that. There's some other items that I'll go through to kind of clean up the ordinance, things that we've noticed out in the real world that we needed to clean up. And then there's another item, the last one, which has been floating around and got a lot more steam. So I went ahead and agreed it's probably needed. I'm going to hit the first slide of Crestwood. It takes a while. What we did is took Crestwood, took what the citizens, we presented with them out in the field, and then sat down and designed the striping, because it has to be designed. One of the things that you'll see, this is in front of Dick's, is the red is the no parking areas. You've got, of course, you don't want any parking in front of Dick's. They've got their own parking lot. Then you have the street entrance, and then another section of no parking. What you're going to see is you'll see some gaps at the streets that are pulled back. You know, like on the next street on the south side, you'll see the two red lines. That's for the sight visibility. We want to make sure when a car pulls up to that stop sign, if there was a car parked right on that edge, they would not be able to see coming out. So we want to get that parking away from that. We're following our own sight visibility ordinances. So just wanted to point that out, that's something that we don't want that car parked right on the edge.
Ken, are you painting the curbs? Is that how we're delineating that?
We're delineating it with basically a white edge line along that, where there'll be parking allowed, there'll be a white edge line. And then as we get to the areas where no parking will be allowed, we'll taper it into that point. So it'll just be an open section, open width. But that parking where it's allowed will have a white edge line, much like when you go down Main Street, you got the little short dashes, it'll be a solid. So that if you want to park in front of your driveway, hey, you can do that. That's one thing we didn't want to do, is just skip driveways. This is the next section. Again, you'll see at each street, we've got some sight visibility where some no parking is. This section is in front of the Housing Authority, and the south section, of course, is across the street from it. And as we talked about, the north side had no parking. That's just going to be a straight buffer zone. You got a long section here with parking allowed, and then that section where you'll see in right there, that's as it gets up to Ben Jordan where we make a dedicated left turn lane. So we pulled the no parking away from that to get the full 3 lanes. One other thing is Crestwood that we've already done. Residents asked about the east side of Ben Jordan, how we had 2 lanes that were just kind of a free-for-all. Nobody knew what to do. We went ahead and got that striped with our current striping program and made one of those lanes a dedicated left. So now there's one lane goes straight through or turn right, and the other one is at left. So it kind of follows with what those citizens requested. Kind of give you a timeline on this part. We've contacted their contractor is contracted with a sub who does the power washing. It's a special truck that there's only a couple in the state where they actually power wash that existing stripe off, sucks it up right behind it so there's no debris or anything. And we just got to give them a 2-week notice. And our thought is if this passes on the first, today, then we can go ahead and contact them after this meeting, tomorrow, this week, get them on board so that when July 6th happens, and if it passes a second reading, we can get right after it and get them scheduled in July as soon as we can. Any questions on the Crestwood? Okay.
And we did talk with the residents about this and present it with them?
Yes, we have. Okay. They got the general. We did talk about that we were going to have to do some modifications, not exact what we showed them because of the fact I had to go in there and draw calculations and do the links at the streets. But they got a good overview of generally we're going to get as much parking as we can get safely for the residents out there.
And they all still have access to their driveways?
Absolutely, yes. Regardless of whether there's parking there or not, yes. And same on the north side. Even though there'll be that white buffer line, you can still cross it. Even in the part where you'll have that double yellow is a left turn lane. If there's a driveway right there at Ben Jordan, they can still cross it. That's permissible.
Good. Thank you for doing that.
It was exciting. The other ones is Placido Benavides. Actually, we did not have on our ordinance, and that's any street that's not listed to increase speed limits, it's 30. Well, got to thinking, hey, I don't think Placido's on, we haven't revised it since then. So Placido Benavides is on there to increase it to 35. And in addition to that, Salem Road, that little piece from the loop to Placido is in there. In addition, we were able to, I know there's been some discussion about when that baseball area, the little complex there, they get a lot of cars and they start parking on the street. It's in here to no park that section of basically all of Placido and all of Salem. So that's a consequence. That's a good, favorable thing. Let's see, go through some others. Northside Road, for whatever reason, I just happened to drive down it. That thing was posted at 50 miles an hour from Navarro to the city limits. We are getting that back down to a reasonable speed of 35. I don't know, that sign's been there for ages. So we're changing that. And then the last one is the school zone for Our Lady of Victory.
Divine School.
Yes. Anyway, on Mesquite, we got a lot more requests. I got from both parents, from the school, and it's a very short school zone just to slow those cars down during the peak times. And that's it for the ordinance revisions for the traffic.
Thank you for looking at that, particularly number 7, Ken.
You're welcome. Like I said, we got a lot more calls, and went out there and looked at it and said, yes, we can accommodate that.
And when would these go into effect?
after 10 days after July 6th. Right, Thomas?
July 16th.
July 16th.
Only because the arithmetic was easy.
I'm, there you go. You got me.
10 days.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Ken. At this time, we'll open up for public hearing. If you wish to speak in this item, please raise your hand. Your hand feature on Zoom or submit a comment card to city staff. Are there any comment cards on this item? Mr. Foote, are there any citizens that wish to speak on this item? Okay. If there are no further comments, I will close the public hearing. I will ask for a motion and a second on this item.
Move we accept item C2.
Second.
We have a motion from Jeff and a second from Andrew. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. The consent agenda will be read by April.
Item D1 is the adoption of the minutes of the June 1st, 2021 City Council meeting. Item D2 is an ordinance amending Chapter 24 of the Victoria City Code to increase the credit card surcharge on utility payments made via the interactive voice response system, and this is on second and third reading. Item D3 is a resolution approving payment for the annual software maintenance to Central Square Technologies in the amount of $172,889.70. Item D4 is a resolution awarding the 2020-2021 sanitary sewer line cleaning project to All Points Inspection Services Incorporated of Weberville, Texas, for their low proposal amount of $86,399. Item D5 is a resolution renewing an annual supply contract for limestone base to CEMEX Incorporated of San Antonio, Texas, in the amount of $23.25 per ton for a total of approximately $116,250. Item D6 is a resolution designating the city manager as the authorized official to approve the fiscal year 2022 for the Motor Vehicle Crime Prevention Authority grant program. And item D7 is a resolution approving the purchase of emergency medical supplies from Boundtree Medical LLC via governmental purchasing contract by board contract number 610-20 in an estimated amount of $195,000.
I will ask for a motion and a second on this item.
I move we approve. Second.
Oh, okay.
That was a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
For the record.
Okay, we have a motion from Jan and a second from Jeff. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Action items for council's discussion.
Item E1 is a resolution adopting the Victoria Thoroughfare Master Plan.
So I just have a brief introduction tonight, Council. So our Thoroughfare Master Plan is a long-range planning document used to guide the development of the city's transportation network. We began this plan update in October of 2020, and tonight I have Jim Harvey with our Consultant Alliance Transportation Group to give a presentation on our new plan.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem and council members, for inviting us to present on the plan. So I'm just going to quickly go over the purpose of the plan, the planning process we used in developing the plan, the analysis of existing and future conditions, a little description of the thoroughfare plan itself, and then discussion about implementing and funding. This might be a good time to mention that you were provided with a hard copy of this plan a few weeks ago. We received feedback and comments on that hard copy, and we made some minor changes. One was to add an airline drive extension to serve the airport access, and another was to adjust some of the description of the funding mechanisms and implementation that were requested. Those are in the the copy of record that was provided to you for the agenda today, but we'll discuss those in a little bit more detail when I get to those parts of the presentation. So a thoroughfare master plan, as Julie said, is a long-range planning document. It's an infrastructure-oriented document that lays out a configuration for your transportation system. Your current thoroughfare plan was developed and approved in 1998. The content and text of that plan has not been changed since that time. There have been map amendments showing occasional new roadways or other things since then. The last map amendment was in 2018. The thoroughfare plan is not a short-term list of projects. It's a vision for how you want your future transportation system to serve the community and operate to provide safe and efficient transportation for your citizens. The alignments in the plan are not final. They're recommendations, and as development happens and as you work with the community, some of those may be adjusted to account for new ideas, new plans, new growth that were not clearly identified at the present time. So that means that the plan should be revisited on a regular basis, and you should be open to minor adjustments to make it more effective. We looked at two basic areas, the municipal boundary of the city itself plus the ETJ, because you want to make sure that your transportation system is serving not only the area that you are responsible for today, but the area that you may be responsible for sometime in the future. We looked at a broad range of plans prior to beginning any work to look at previous goals, objectives, and perspectives, because we never want to start the planning process from scratch. You always want to respect the previous efforts. That plan review included the Metropolitan Transportation Plan that the MPO developed in 2019, the comprehensive plan, an array of your ordinances, guidelines, and standards, and we also coordinated with the other master planning efforts that are going on at the present time. So the downtown master plan, the drainage master plan, and the parks master plan, we incorporated them, those contractors and citizens working on those plans as stakeholders in our process. There was also an extensive public involvement process, which, as you know, has been fairly challenging through 2020. We had virtual stakeholder engagement in which we used interactive mapping tools where individuals could actually join with us in a conversation, and they could look at and pull up a map and mark that map up with their comments and show us areas that they had concerns about. They could also access those tools during periods when we weren't actively meeting by going to the City of Victoria website and pulling up the interactive map and surveys and other instruments where they could give us feedback. We had several rounds of stakeholder engagement. We started with internal stakeholders, which includes all the council members, the staff leadership, and your planning partners, such as members of the MPO from the county and other TxDOT and other areas. We also had a technical committee that included your planning partners. We then went to private sector stakeholders, landowners, community leaders, and we talked to them. Again, these were done virtually, but we had very stimulating, very engaging conversations with them, got a lot of positive feedback. And then finally, when we got down to looking at specific alignments, we had stakeholder meetings with the developers and other persons who are very familiar with property and growth patterns, and to help us refine the alignments so we weren't tripping over any existing site plans or hurting people's ability to use their property, as well as to make sure that we're dealing with the topography and the other environmental features correctly as well. The process was, that process was followed by a public open house, again done virtually, but we had an excellent feedback from that effort. We had about 60-some-odd people who attended the meeting through Zoom, but we also had about 1,600 views on a Facebook Live, simultaneous publication of the process with numerous comments back through the Facebook channels as well. So I think we got a lot of attention from the community, and a lot of the feedback was very constructive, very productive to the planning process. Based on that, we developed a set of goals for the thoroughfare plan. You see those on the screen. State of good repair and maintaining the system was a high priority with stakeholders, as was reducing traffic, increasing thoroughfare network connectivity, increasing route options because people wanted to be able to slide over from a route that was congested or was experiencing some sort of temporary delay. Ensuring that the network capacity meets the demand in the future, and then increasing the multimodal options, people who want to use transit or walk or some non-motorized form of transit to make sure that everyone's needs were being met. Now, some of that's a little beyond the nature of a thoroughfare plan, but we tried to incorporate those elements as best we could into the process. So one of the first things we did is an analysis, and for each of these analysis, in addition to the plan, we also provided a technical memorandum to staff, which they've received, and so this gives them more in-depth information and details about the analysis and the findings and what the city might be able to do about some of the issues. But since we first looked at the land use, looking at the commercial development and how it interacted with the thoroughfare plan, obviously you've got heavy commercial development along your major thoroughfares, particularly Navarro, Houston Highway, Rio Grande, the Zacklands Parkway, and of course in downtown Victoria. You're currently experiencing moderate to heavy congestion on a lot of those same roadways, particularly Navarro Street. And when we looked at Victoria Transit and how they're operating, they tend to operate on those major thoroughfares as well. So our opportunity there was if we can improve the function and operation of those major thoroughfares, we're not only helping auto drivers, but we're also going to be helping transit movement. They can maintain their schedules better. They can provide a better level of service to their clientele. We also looked at active transportation, walking and biking to make sure that we were considering how those travelers interacted with the system. Right now, you don't have any on-street active transportation facilities except for the standard, a typical sidewalk grid in certain areas of the town, particularly downtown. But you do have 4 off-road facilities, the Lone Creek Hike and Bike Trail, the Riverside Park Hike and Bike Trail, which is the paved portion, and then there's a Riverside Park nature trail in the Athey Nature Sanctuary. So that's the unpaved portion of the trail in Riverside Park. And then you have the network of sidewalks that I mentioned, and we tried to account for those in the way that we laid out some of the design recommendations for the thoroughfare plan that we'll talk about in just a second. You'll notice that we didn't have a goal specifically related to safety in the list of goals. That's because in each one of the goals, whether it was improving the condition of the roadway, dealing with traffic, each one of those, one of the motivations behind the goal was improving safety. So you can kind of consider safety an element of each of those other goals. The crash hotspots are listed on the slide. A lot of the same major roadways that were experiencing congestion, but 59 business at Navarro and at Laurent, and then Zacklands Parkway at Navarro. So those, and 5 Points. So those were places that we looked at in particular as we went forward with looking at the improvements to both the infrastructure and the operations of the system. We also looked at the major environmental features and cultural features, so the aquifers, the river basin, the floodplain, and the cultural assets such as historic districts, parks, libraries, et cetera. So findings, north-south connectivity needs to be one of your priorities. We got that both from the technical analysis and from the stakeholder feedback. We're going to talk about that just a little bit more on the next slide. The congestion exists largely along freeways and arterials, so your largest functional classification of roadways are where you're having the most problems. And as I said, the transit routes are using those major thoroughfares, so we're helping transit as well as the roadway travel for auto drivers and trucks when we improve them. Safety concerns along Navarro and Business 59 were major components of the analysis. Fortunately, you're already doing something about those issues because those roadways are undergoing median treatments. The median treatments are going to help smooth traffic and reduce conflict points, but they are not going to necessarily address some of the future problems that are going to happen as the area continues to grow and congestion continues to increase. So there may be other things you need to do to look at those routes as well. There are opportunities to improve pedestrian facilities. Most of the recommendations we're making are following guidance we got from the stakeholders and the staff related to separated off roadway bicycle facilities because people are more comfortable with those. And then your hydrology, your floodplains and aquifers are something of a constraint to potential new alignments, especially to the south. And so we had to be careful with how we designed and chose those alignments as we went through the process. We also looked at your future growth on the transportation system. So remember I talked about that north-south connectivity. Your projected population growth is, you've got a lot of heavily growing areas in population on the north side, including above the Zach Luntz Parkway, along John Stockbauer. And if you look on the right-hand side, your employment growth tends to be more toward the center of the city and into some of the main parts of downtown and adjacent areas. So now you've got that future problem of connecting those new residential areas with your new employment areas. So you're going to see a lot more demand on your north-south roadways, and that's going to be an issue that hopefully the layout of the thoroughfare plan network will help you to begin to address. There are also planned facilities that we took into consideration in the future. That includes the I-69 corridor designation that everybody's been working on in a collaborative effort, and also the Transportation Improvement Program and the Metropolitan Transportation Plan projects that the Victoria MPO currently has in their plan and program to happen over the next 25 years. So we looked at those as well in laying out the thoroughfare plan. We also did a system deficiencies analysis. So what that means is a systems deficiency analysis is a technical analysis of your system to identify places on the system where you're likely to experience service failures in the future as your area begins to grow and the demand goes up. We did this with two models, one with the travel demand model from your MPO that you've used on other plans such as the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, but also an operation simulation model called TransModeler that looks at the system in much more detail. The travel demand model projected future congestion along all of the usual suspects, 87 as it extends out from the city, 59 business, east from the city, south of downtown, US 77, Nursery Drive, Moody, Navarro, Sam Houston. So those are the places that you typically see traffic from your travel demand model. And most thoroughfare plan studies stop at that point, but it's not adequate because the thoroughfare plan looks at things in more detail. And the operation of the system and how the roadways interact at intersections becomes a very important part of that. So the transmodeler simulation software pushes down to another level of detail. And if you look at this slide, you'll see that what you're seeing in this, the darker color is where the operational simulation showed the interaction of some of those demand deficiencies and some of your intersection operational deficiencies to cause service gaps. Now, those are not actual gaps in roadways. They're places where the level of service breaks down. So we use the combination of those two tools to look at both improvements to the existing roadway and improvements to or extensions to other roadways to provide connectivity and some relief from one roadway to the other. But so a couple of examples. There's about 5 or 6 listed in the plan, but we actually looked at 10 corridors and the operation and the intersections along those 10 corridors. But here's an example. If you look at this is Navarro in the vicinity of the mall, and the improvement in the area is the extension of John Stockbauer. If you look on the left, you'll notice that there's severe congestion on both on Navarro and on the Jack Lentz Parkway Service Road at the intersection. With the extension and connection of John Stockbauer through to Plaza Benavides, you've relieved that congestion at the intersection. And this is in the future, so that means that you've made a big step towards solving a problem that was going to be there with you for a long time. It also improves the flow along Navarro itself as you come up toward Plaza Benavides, so that we're showing improvements in both areas. And we've done this, as I said, for 10 major corridors and most of the intersections. One of the other areas that came up in discussion on numerous occasions with the stakeholders and in the public meetings was the 5-point intersection. One of the stakeholder suggestions was to make Moody Street a one-way, to reduce the number of conflict points happening at the intersection. Our traffic engineers looked at that, and you're going to have to ask them specifics if you want to know the details, because I'm not a traffic engineer. But they said that by itself would not be an adequate solution for the roadway, especially in the future with the additional demand. So what they proposed was to signalize the intersection, and they tested out some signal configurations that provided relief at the location. One of the things they discovered that is if you signalize the intersection, then you're probably going to have to, if you go back east along Rio Grande, you've got a signalized intersection at Bridge Street. You will probably have to do something with that signal, maybe take it out, or at the very least coordinate it very heavily with the signal at 5 points. So those are the kinds of things that the plan provides. And the nice thing about it, and I'm going to see if I can get that, there we go. So the nice thing about it is that transmodeler simulation tool that I told you about, TxDOT calls it a mesoscopic model, a little Tony for me, but the idea is that it's a simulation, but it covers your entire study area. So you now have a tool that we're going to leave behind that you can, sorry, it keeps sneaking down. So you now have a tool that you can use to analyze any intersection, any section of roadway on any of your major thoroughfares in the city, so that when you do future plans or when a developer comes in with proposed development, you can actually use this to look at how that's going to affect the roadways in the vicinity and the entire system as a whole. And unlike the travel demand model, it'll show you your turning movements, your failures at intersections, the queues at the intersections, which is how they knew that the Bridge Street signal would be a problem, because traffic would queue back from 5 Point, and the two signals then would have some conflicting operations. So that tool is going to be left behind. You can then use that at any point that you need to do that work. We also developed a set of conceptual alignments. These were based on the results of the modeling, the stakeholder feedback, and the issues that were identified. And we worked with a technical committee on the plan, and we also worked with the stakeholders kind of back and forth, looking at the alignments, trying to select the ones that made the most sense and worked the best. So basically, in putting those alignments together, we stratified the thoroughfare network into a functional classification system with several classes of roadways, starting with expressways, which you don't have a whole lot of control over, but primary arterials and secondary arterials, which tend to be more about mobility and moving people longer distances from one side of town to the other. And then collector roadways that tend to serve specific areas and draw people to and from the arterial system to serve your commercial areas, your residential areas, and then the local streets. So that was used to develop a thoroughfare network. And basically, just to give you some highlights, we've added 25 new alignments throughout the city and the ETJ. 4 roadways were upgraded on their functional classification. That's Sam Houston Drive, North Street, Hanselman Road, and Bob White / Chaparral Road were all upgraded by one functional class. We proposed additional loop corridors, so extensions of Parsons Road, Ball Airport Road, and Placido Benavides. And then extensions of Tropical, Larkspur, Mockingbird, Ben Jordan, East Airline Road, trying to create a gridded network outside of Loop 463. So that's a quick synopsis on the plan. As I mentioned earlier, the one thing that was added to this network since you got your hard copy of the plan, but is included in the copy of record for the meeting, is the extension of Airline Drive to connect to Business 59 and provide access to the airport. We also provided a matrix of options for developing cross-sections for these different types of roadways. It's not a black and white, this is what you do for a particular functional class. The idea is that you have to work with the community to develop a roadway cross-section that is sensitive to the context of the surrounding land uses. So, but these are examples of sections that we tried to incorporate some of the preferences that the city proposed. This is a collector street that would have a shared use path, as I said, off the roadway, so that bicyclists had a facility to use in conjunction with the collector. Based on the feedback, people using bicycles, particularly families, are much more comfortable in a separated facility. The four-lane secondary arterial, we're showing a sidewalk-supported 90-foot section, 12-foot lanes, because the city said that the 12-foot preference was what they wanted. Nationally, the tendency is to kind of squeeze the lanes down to slow things down, but this is Texas and our vehicles are pretty large, so 12 feet seemed a good example. That doesn't mean it has to be 12 feet, but it certainly is we put examples in the plan that represented what you preferred to see. The final part of the plan was implementation and funding. It provided an overview of some possible funding solutions. Essentially, Councilmember Lofgren asked us to go back and look at it because, number one, I had one misstatement in the section. I'd like to have all my clients think I'm infallible, but it doesn't always work out that way. So we made that correction. And so what we discussed in the funding mechanisms was, one is obviously your capital improvement program and your own city funds. But we also talked about the MPO and the federal and state funding program and how to work with those planning partners, which is something the stakeholders also asked us to do, is make sure that we encourage the city to work with all of its planning partners to identify funding for these things. We also have a brief write-up on fee ordinances. The two things we discussed that we were able to incorporate in to the adjustments we made prior to the council meeting, so that it was in your copy of record, is to discuss impact fees, which are imposed on development that's going to have a traffic impact on the system. It's a growing area of interest in Texas cities. I think there's less than 12 cities that have actually implemented it at this time, but there's 6 or 8 that are using it successfully, including Frisco in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Georgetown has just passed an ordinance, and College Station and Midland are looking at it. So it's a pretty diverse set of cities that are looking at those impact fees. The other thing we looked at are what are sometimes referred to as utility fees, but they're technically maintenance fees in the legislation. And those are fees that are essentially assessed to the community with their utility bill, because despite the fact that transportation has kind of a really good image because it can take us almost anywhere, transportation really is a utility that serves the land uses around it. So, so there's a brief discussion of that as well, but those fees can only be used for maintenance of the system. So they can't be used to actually implement new infrastructure. But as we said, state of good repair is a part of a good transportation planning process for your thoroughfare plan. And then again, public-private partnerships, things like donated right-of-way or other things that you can work out with the developers to mitigate the impacts of their developments. So there's a discussion of that as well. And as I said, all of that's supported with the models we're leaving behind and with the technical memorandums that have already been delivered to staff. And with that, I'd be glad to take any questions that you would like to ask.
I do have a specific question. Thank you. That was a great presentation.
Thank you.
I need you to go all the way back to the north-south corridor slide. Sure. It had the city and it had future growth. Yep, you passed it.
That one.
Okay. Yes. And then I want to look at the population growth. And you may have gone too fast, but it looked like you had growth on Ben Jordan Street out at the loop, out at 463. And I'm trying to visualize that. And then you also had growth on what looks like it's between Airline and Miori, between Stockbauer and Sam Houston. And I felt like, okay, that the one on Ben Jordan in the Loop is actually the high school, I believe. And that's why I needed some time to look at it. And then the one between Airline and Miori, between Stockbauer and Sam Houston, I think you might have meant to have on Ben Jordan inside Stockbauer. And I'm hoping somebody with the city is listening and looking at this too, because I don't think you know our town as well as some of our folks.
Well, I certainly don't know the town as well as your staff does.
And that
They're
really the
experts.
reason I'm asking this is because if there is some error in it, I just didn't want us to adopt this and then go back and have to fix it. I just wanted to have the opportunity to fix it, if that makes sense. I'm sorry.
No, I understand. So basically, it may be a little hard to visualize because what we're looking at here, this is based on your traffic analysis zone structure for the travel demand model. So it may be showing growth in an area. In other words, the growth could be happening all in one little corner of that square, but it shows it in the entire square because that's the level that the geographic information system was displaying it. But we went over these in pretty substantial detail with the staff. This information is your adopted growth profile from the MPO's Metropolitan Transportation Plan and the growth profile you developed with TxDOT in 2019. And then we added one or two spots that stakeholders like the developers and other folks familiar with the area told us might be in addition to what was known in 2019. So, I mean, not to dump the question on Julie, but.
Well, yeah, I mean, what will happen because we're expecting some growth in some of these areas?
So yeah, our travel demand model has a base year of 2012, and then we refreshed it with our MTP that we adopted in 2019. And by that refresh is, we use the, census projected growth. We put it into the travel demand model, but we will be actually requesting council to approve in our budget a demographic study. Well, actually, it will be funded through the MPO to take the 2020 census data, then to do a complete update on our travel demand model, which of course would change. But I mean, that is our growth pattern. It is all towards, the north and around the loop. And he's completely correct on the geographic levels, the TASs, as we call them, that are built into the travel demand model. That's why sometimes it looks sort of weird because your TAS can be a little bit bigger, but the growth is happening, in a census, a specific part of that TAS that then kind of shades the entire TAS. But it is based off of our existing travel demand model.
And Julie, excuse me, Julie said something else that's pretty important there. The travel demand model has a 2012 base year. So you might look at an area and say, well, how's that growth going to happen? It's already built out. Well, it happened already. In other words, if the growth happened between 2012 and 2020, then it's still going to show up as growth in our analysis because of the way the travel demand model works. So some of this is a little counterintuitive, but I guarantee you it's as close to accurate as we could get with the existing information.
Okay, and I get to it's not really extending any roads in those areas. It didn't ring true when you were there, and I wanted to go back to it, but thank you.
I move we adopt item E1.
I second.
There's been motions from Jeff and a second from Jan. Is there any further discussion?
Yeah, I had a question in regards to 5 points. I travel that extensively daily. You talked about a 5 signal, a 5 street signal.
Well, what we've looked at this point was a signal that, that included the concept of a one-way section on Moody. So I'm not sure that, I think it would really be more of a 4.
Any thoughts to possibly closing off one of those streets like Moody and making it a dead end on that one side where they could get out multiple other places?
There was a discussion of that, about closing off Moody, but one of the first things that we needed to talk about then was that in order to make that kind of recommendation, you really have to do a very detailed land use study of what's going on around that section and what you're doing to those communities. And that was kind of beyond the scope of what we're doing in this study, so we didn't include it as a definite recommendation, but our recommendation is that you should take a really good hard look at signalizing the intersection along with other improvements, which could include that sort of thing. We have that in the memorandum, in the stakeholder memorandum, showing that feedback, that was one of the recommendations.
Yeah, there's several houses, a couple of businesses, but it's not overly.
Sure.
And that was part of that coordination with the different master plans, in discussing with the downtown planning group. You know, you would be eliminating some access to some of those businesses if you actually closed it down. So if you made a straight or one-way heading north, you could create sort of that function as a 4-way signal. So people that are heading, you know, continuing on to Moody could also go straight at the same time, same movement. And so you effectively create a kind of a 4-way signal by changing it to a one-way only, but you still have the access. The other option, and the safer option, would definitely be to, you know, cul-de-sac Moody and eliminate access.
Okay, I just brought that forth.
A question.
I don't know the answer.
On the 5-point scenario comparison, are you talking about making it a one-way in that yellow strip? Or the whole thing?
No, the yellow, on the left-hand side, the orange and the red represents the level of service.
Oh, Moody going north, okay.
Yeah.
But not coming into town. Oh, okay, I see what you're saying.
Business 59 would stay open.
Okay.
Right.
Above.
Yes, I'm
Okay.
sorry. Sorry I didn't explain that better. But the colors are just the level of service at the roadways. In other words, if you, this is showing the condition in, if nothing is done. The right is showing if a signal is put in, but it isn't necessarily optimized with the other signals. So you're showing an improvement, but you're still going to have issues as growth occurs. So it's going to take some detailed study to get that intersection working in its optimum configuration.
Are the red dots signals? Are poles for signals?
Yes.
Okay,
Well, in one, there's stop signs, and the other, they're just indicating that there's traffic control.
okay. Okay. All the discussions gone? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you very much.
So Mayor and Council, this is just one of the 4 master plans that we will be bringing forward to you for approval. So the remaining 3, the downtown master plan, the drainage master plan, and the parks master plan, will be presented to council for approval sometime in October.
Item E2 is a resolution approving the Victoria Sales Tax Development Corporation's Innovative Collective Project and associated expenditures in an amount not to exceed $100,000 over up to 3 years.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and members of council. I'm just here to introduce this item. On May 24th, last month, the Victoria Sales Tax Development Corporation adopted a new project called the Innovation Collective Project. And as you know, all projects and expenditures of the Sales Tax Corporation must also be approved by City Council. So that's why this item is before you here tonight. I'm happy to introduce tonight Dr. Ken Coldwell, the Dean of UHV School of Business Administration, who would like to do a presentation to describe what the Innovation Collective is and what the city's involvement in it will be. Thank you.
Thomas. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem and council people. I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to this project, which personally I think is going to be transformative to the city. Oh, and I'm very cognizant of the fact that most of you have seen some pieces, if not all, of this presentation. So I'm going to try to move through it pretty quickly and just leave time for questions. You know, I've given a number of presentations at a number of different events and that sort of thing, but also Nick Smoot, who's the founder of the Innovation Collective, has been through here 4 or 5 times already and spoken to a number of different groups himself. So the Innovation Collective was founded by Nick Smoot. He's a serial entrepreneur, and originally it was formed in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Was the first facility. Now it has 11 other facilities at some stage of development. Some are further along than others, all over the United States. So it's pretty much gone national. Does not have a Texas location yet, but their intention is to make Victoria the first. They're also talking to San Marcos and some further south areas as well. So what is it? In a way, I think, you know, it's easy to think of it as a kind of economic development program, but it's not exactly that. So economic development is defined by the EDA as, you know, creating new and expanding businesses, which lead to new and better jobs and hopefully higher wages. Although some of that happens in the Innovation Collective, really what they're about is creating an ecosystem of innovation in a particular region, which does help individuals start and grow really innovative businesses. And they do this through a series of events they have and trainings they have and partnership and placemaking. Eventually it comes a placemaking real estate development deal, but that is not what is at issue tonight. So in terms of the goals, what we're trying to achieve at UHV, and I believe the benefits to the region itself, is to try and create a vigorous entrepreneurial ecosystem in the Victoria region, which I think is a highly necessary complement to the existing economic development issues that are going on right now in terms of bringing larger corporations in and creating new jobs that way. I believe that it's complementary to try to build sustainable organic economic development along with trying to bring in new or existing rather companies. It also is intended for it to be located downtown and for it to become part of the downtown revitalization initiative. And furthermore, the intention is to make Victoria a more attractive place and hopefully get more of our graduates and other young people in the city to stay after graduation and feel like there's opportunities for them here and not feel like they have to move out into the cities to find opportunities and then perhaps move back later when they want to raise a family and find they can't afford to in those cities. So, you know, that's something we notice quite a bit at the university. And it really hurts us when our graduates, you know, immediately take a job in Houston and leave. And furthermore, particularly now that we have this sort of new normal of not having to necessarily be exactly located next to where you work, we can perhaps draw new residents and of course new jobs to Victoria as well. So those are the overall goals that we're trying to achieve with the collective. So this is a specific proposal. So the Innovation Collective starts to build an ecosystem before they start to build a specific place. That ecosystem building process is essentially what the community will fund, as you'll see on the next slide, for the first 3 years of their existence. Basically, they're going to provide these services, and they need to cover their costs, and the community does that. After the first 3 years, they commit to not asking for any further funding. They're a for-profit company, and they have various ways, which I'd be happy to discuss, about making money for themselves after that, which is they have a large interest in doing because, in fact, as I'll show you again on a slide in a minute, the first 3 years, they really don't make much money on this at all. They have a program fee of $25,000 a year. That's what they sort of collect for their services. They don't like the idea of calling something a board or a committee, so they call it a success team. The success team are stakeholders and investors in the project, and UHV has agreed to be the lead success team member, and we're developing an MOU, which is being reviewed by our attorneys right now. So this is how it breaks down for the 3 years. It comes out to a little over $900,000. That's sort of a discount. In other cities, they've charged between $1 million and $1.5 million. This is what it would cost the community. And what we did was we invited the Sales Tax Development Corporation to make a $100,000 grant payable over 3 years, so not in a lump sum, to help support the Innovation Collective in this startup period. And they would, of course, be a member of the success team at that point. And that was unanimously approved by the Sales Tax Board. So the last thing I'm going to leave you with, and this is sort of new, so those of you who've seen this before might not have seen this level of detail. A bunch of people have asked me, quite a few people in fact, have asked me about how are the funds actually spent, and how much of those funds are kept within the Victoria region. And the answer is that most of it is. So I broke down the first year, you can see, was $286,840. 214 of that, of 65%, stays within the community, and 71,000 goes more toward administrative things. So the things that stay in the community are they hire a local person as a community manager. So of course the salary for that person gets covered. And all these events and programming, all of this money is essentially spent within the community by renting spaces, by buying refreshments, by all that sort of thing, by bringing people in and putting them in hotel rooms. All of that is, of course, comes back to the community as well. You can see of the things that don't stay in the community, really the largest expense is marketing. To try to get people to come to these events and be aware of what the Innovation Collective is doing. And then, of course, they have their own administrative expenses, and as I mentioned, they have a $25,000 program fee. So again, I went through this pretty quickly because I know a lot of you have seen it. I know Councilperson Scott in particular, I believe, has seen it 4 times now. I appreciate your attention, and I invite any questions or comments that you have.
I move adoption of E2.
I second it.
We have a motion from Jeff and a second from Andrew. Is there any further discussion?
Second was from Mark.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mark. You sounded like Andrew.
I think
Okay,
April
my
got- I
correction,
think
it should have
April
been
had it.
Mark.
I sound like Jan?
No, Mark, I'm
He said
Andrew.
Andrew.
I had said,
Andrew.
I don't think he's.
I was going to say. I was going to say.
Oh,
I didn't know her voice was.
I did not look over there. That's what it was. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Well played.
Motion
Thank you very
carries.
much. I appreciate your support.
Thank you, Ken. The time is now 6:32, according to the watch. After the city secretary reads the agenda, We will conclude the regular portion of our agenda and move to executive session.
The City Council will recess to executive session at 6:32 PM in accordance with Texas Government Code 551.087 to discuss or deliberate the offer to a financial or other incentive to a business prospect that the City Council seeks to have, locate, stay, or expand in or near the territory of the City of Victoria, in which the City of Victoria is conducting economic development negotiations. In accordance with Texas Government Code 551.072 to deliberate the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property interests due to the fact that deliberation in an open meeting would have a detrimental effect on the position of the city in negotiations with a third party, and in accordance with Texas Government Code 551.071, consultation with attorney on a matter involving pending or contemplated litigation or other matter in which the duty of the attorney of the governmental body under the Texas Disciplinary Rules of Professional Conduct of the State Bar of Texas clearly conflicts with the Texas Open Meetings Act. Thank you.
We're going to take a 5-minute break at 6:34.